We are sitting here with Ben Kaufman from the great Yonder Mountain String Band, and we're at Del Fest 12. And Ben, it's great to see you, and a real pleasure to meet you. And let's just start out by, let me ask you, how you doing? And could you tell us how did it all start for you? The whole music scene, just getting into the music.
Well, I'm doing great. It's hard to be doing bad at Del Fest, you know. How did I get started with music? I was born into a musical family. My father was a musician, and so I kind of grew up with seeing his bands playing, and he was a big band jazz musician. So that was the music that was around and being played a lot in my house. And then it's kind of like, I guess, like a lot of people, you know, I had to take piano lessons from an early age, and then school band, like we still had music programs in schools. Yeah. And I had a really good teacher for music in school. And then around about 6th grade or so, I got to pick an instrument to play. And with the guidance of my music teacher from school, he said to my father, he's like, you know, your son's, he's a fine piano player, but he's not a piano player. He's a bass player. And I'd never played the bass before. And but he and my dad, you know, like music speak or musicians speak, you can kind of talk to musicians, and they just kind of vibed it out that I was a bass player.
Have you seen him again since?
Yeah. Oh, he came to the last show we played in Boston.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, he's pretty proud, you know. But it turns out like he was right. So I got a 3/4 size electric bass, and you know, didn't have any strength in my fingers. These were the only ones that worked, so I played like that, and we put together a band. I was in 6th grade. It was me and a couple 7th graders. Put together a band and just started playing like cover tunes and stuff. And
was your dad involved at all with you playing? Like, was he as another musician?
Encouragement, you know.
Yeah.
We definitely played music together in the house. You know.
A singer as well?
No. He would sing, you know, like Sinatra tunes. Sit down at the piano, right. Sing and play that. But
did you take singing lessons to get to where you're at now?
Nope. I took. I was in. You know, some like musical theater throughout junior high school and high school, and some choir stuff, madrigals. I really enjoyed that, but it's not. Almost all of my musical instruction was bass and piano, but really by the time I got to, I had one, you know, who I'd consider like my mentor. Musical mentor, and I studied with him, but it was a lot less about technique and than it was sort of ear training or transcriptions or really but more just about life. You know, he was a guy, he was a bass player, he was a composer, he was a pianist as well, but he also had a day job and he was raising a family, and it was a lot more like about like, so hey, you want to be a musician, huh? Well, this is what it looks like, and this is what I have to do in order to be able to play music and support my family and, you know, put a roof over our heads. And
it looked great to you. You were all in.
Well, yeah, I didn't have, you know, I didn't really have anything else that I felt like I was particularly good at, and you know, I was whatever. I was good in school, but I didn't have anything that called to me. I had a little bit of a detour right about somewhere halfway through high school. This mentor that I was telling you about, he got killed at a gig.
Oh, a gig?
Yeah, it was. He was subbing on bass for I don't even know what, and it was at a Howard Johnson's ballroom.
Wow.
And there was an illegal propane tank set up, and it exploded, and he got killed. And it was some shitty gig. After that, I was sort of like, I was very much, as a young person, and it really, for the first time, dealing with tragedy, in any to that degree or of that impact, I sort of went like, well, gosh, so music, huh? And like kind of started to hurt to think about it.
How old were you at that time?
I was maybe 14,
Yeah.
15. And I just had this association at that point, like here this guy was, and he was doing one of his friends a favor to take the gig, and it was some shitty gig anyway, and he got killed for it. And like, is that really what I want to do? And I kind of convinced myself that it wasn't, but I still wanted to do something creative. So I decided to go to film school. I was always had a passing interest in film and video. And right about that time was when the technology put video. It was widely available at home. I mean, the cameras were still big and everything, but you could do some cool stuff. So I got into animation and decided to see if I could get into a good film school. And I did. Ended up in New York City studying film for a couple years.
Wow.
And really stopped playing music almost entirely. And thought I wanted to be, thought I wanted to be a director or something. What do you know when you're, 18 or whatever?
Yeah, why not?
But I thought, sure, I want to do that. And I got to film school, and I realized right away, all these other people, they think about film the way I think about music. And it took that, like being immersed in this whole other scene, seeing people who were genuinely into it, and realizing I just wasn't. I like movies, right? But I don't necessarily think, I'm not cut out for that world. And so I went, that was a good realization for me. That's the same time I started listening to the band Fish.
Oh, yeah.
And they kind of took me out of the musical, sort of the genres of music I was listening to at the time. And when I heard them, I just was, I don't know why, it felt very, I appreciated and identified their technique and talent on their instruments, but there was a freedom to what they were doing and the way that they performed their music, and it sparked something in me.
Improv?
Well, improv, I was listening to a lot of music that had improvisation in it, but it wasn't free like that. And also, I'm looking at these guys, there they are on stage, they reminded me of me, like they're a little geeky, they're a little nerdy, but they're wicked good, but it seemed approachable, as having, learned a lot of their music over the years too, realizing just how talented they are. But it comes across very, as a very approachable thing. And certainly that's how it struck me. So that got me back into music. I started to then, from them have my musical sort of landscape opened up more. Still living in New York, but trying to figure out where I was going to go. I didn't want to be there anymore. And then I went down to the Wetlands Club in New York City. That's not there anymore, but it was a great venue.
Sure.
And I went down there to see Colonel Bruce Hampton and Aquarium Rescue Unit. And they had a band opening for him that I'd never heard of called Leftover Salmon. And we got there early, because I was with my buddy, and he's like, oh, we got to get there early. Okay. So we got there early, and all of a sudden Leftover Salmon came out on stage, and I went, what is that? Like, how do you do that? And what even is that? And like, where does that come from? Like, where do these guys come from that they're making music like this? And so I did research, and I'm like, okay, Colorado, huh? Man, at that time, I was really looking for direction. And so once I found out that they were from Colorado, and that's where that music was coming from, that's where I wanted to be. So I left school in New York City and transferred out to school in Colorado.
What year was that about?
That'd have been 1990, the spring of 1995. Yeah, and it's going into the summer of 95. So by the end of the summer of 95, I was in Boulder, going to school, but really, at that time, it was, for whatever reason, it was very inexpensive for me to go to school there. And so I was really just kind of, wasting time trying to put a band together, and put together a bunch of different projects in the next couple of years, all very derivative of Fish and what they were doing. That a lot of people were kind of that. I mean, I still see it too. I mean, they've changed they've created a whole scene, but that was what putting together electric bands and trying to do our best Fish interpretation, and then I along the way, well, once I going back, I guess a little bit, somewhere around high school, beginning of high school, I got an upright bass. My dad wanted me to know how to play it, and every now and then I'd fill in for his bass player for his band. Not that I was very good, but I could get by. And so I had an upright bass. I was just sitting there, and I went into the music store in Boulder one day, and they saw this index card and said, "Hey, do you have an upright bass? Do you want to learn how to play bluegrass? Come, we'll play in our band, and we'll teach you, and you'll get paid." And so I joined a band. They all had day jobs. They called themselves Mountain Standard Time. And there's actually another band called Mountain Standard Time playing right now in Colorado that's not related to them. But these were there was a banker, and there was a guy who worked construction, and a couple other guys that were in their they had their day jobs, and then they'd play bluegrass. And so they gave me the gig, and it was a lot of here's a crash course in the history of bluegrass music, and these are all the important people and the important songs, and you're speeding up, you're slowing down, your intonation's out. It was real crash course. And so I kind of got to learn how to do that, and got paid, which is cool. It was the first time I'd ever gotten paid to play music, really. And as I learned more and learned, it was purely a cover band, I started to write songs or hear songs in a bluegrass style in my head, and I wanted to be able to play them. But that band wasn't, they were just doing standards, So then I had to put together my own band. So I formed my own bluegrass band, and we called that Tree Full of Pigs. And that was a really cool band. We had Armando Zuppa, this guy from Italy, playing banjo. He's wicked good. Ross Martin playing guitar. Ross has gone on to have an incredible career. He's one of the finest guitar players you'll ever run across. And Kerry Messenger playing mandolin. He had a great voice, good singing voice. And we started to play, some cover tunes, but some original tunes too. And then that band had a gig up in Nederland, Colorado. And it was at that gig where I first met Jeff Austin, who would be the mandolin player in Yonder. And then he gave me his card, or wrote down his number, I should say, on a piece of paper. He was like, "Yeah, I've got my buddy's moving to town. He plays banjo. We should pick." And I got to be honest with you, at the time I had 3 different bands going on, and I'm like, I don't know, And maybe a month passed, and he called me, or I called him, I forget, and he's like, "Yeah, we're getting together tonight, and gonna have this big pick. You should come up." And so I did. Went up to Nederland from Boulder, brought my bass, and Jeff was there. Dave Johnston, who was the friend that Jeff was talking about, had just gotten to town, and they had independently met Adam Agela, who plays guitar, obviously. And so it was a big pick. I want to say Vince from Leftover Salmon was there, a bunch of, local people. But we snuck off, the 4 of us, to sing together, pick and sing. And I think we sang Pig in a Pen. And we had, we found our harmony parts pretty naturally and sang well together. We were all at the same age. We didn't have jobs. We didn't have girlfriends. And by the end of that night, it was basically you want to be in a band? And so we did, and we had such a string of good luck and good fortune in the early years of that band. But
how'd you come up with the name?
Picked it out of a book. We had a gig opening for our friends in a band called Runaway Truck Ramp, which was a sort of a bluegrass hybrid band coming out of Colorado. They had a gig at the Fox Theater for their album release party, and it was a sold-out show. And they asked us to open for them. So our debut in Boulder in that Colorado music scene was a sold-out show in front of very like-minded people, and they're like, "What's your band name? We need to put something up on the marquee." We're like, "Shit." So Jeff had a book called an anthology of folk music called Sing Out, and it was all songs and like old magazines, and we're just flipping through, and we knew we wanted to be a something string band or something quartet, and we picked. And we flipped to one page, I forget what it was, that didn't work, and flipped to the next page, and there it was, Yonder. The song was At the Foot of Yonder Mountain. And we look at each other like, Yonder Mountain String Band? And we're like, that sounds good.
Wow.
You know? Roll with it. So then we went down to Boulder for that gig, and there it was up on the marquee, you know, and it was a sold-out show, and everybody was there, and like everybody liked us, you know? I want to say we even had some original tunes at that point, even though that was our first gig. And from there, it just took off, man. You know, like we played a bunch of gigs locally. Got some support from a brewery called Mountain Sun. The Mountain Sun was every Sunday they'd have music at their brewery. They've gone on to sort of conquer the Colorado brewing world, but they've always supported music and loved music. So they kind of helped us out, and Leftover Salmon helped us out with some gigs and making phone calls on our behalf and getting us into some festivals. And boy, before you knew it, we were just on the road and playing, like having really good gigs, and that just kept growing and growing. And you know, so that's sort of
So how old were you then?
I was 23 when Yonder started.
And
yeah.
I bet you folks were pretty psyched for you as well.
Well, eventually.
Yeah.
Eventually. Now, keep in mind, Dad was a musician too. He had a day job, but he was a musician. And in his heart of hearts, what he wanted to do with his life was to be in a band. He met my mom at he had a rock band in the 70s. He met my mom at a gig, right? So he was like a rock and roller at heart. And he always, I think, if he could have, he would have liked to have been, a musician for his gig. And so when I showed an aptitude, and then, and they kind of knew what was going on. Like I did my film school experiment, went out to Boulder and, playing music, and finally called him and said, I think I'm going to drop out of school. There's this band, and, I think it's going to be a thing. And they're like, oh, cautious, like, you sure? Like, well, no, I'm not sure, but I think, that it's going to be a thing, and I can't do, we got gigs, and I can't do these like the classes that I was taking in college are all at night, and early morning too, and that just doesn't work, So, and I'm like, I think I got to try this. They're like, okay, well, what kind of music is it? Rock and roll? I'm like, no, it's bluegrass. I'm sorry, it's what? It's bluegrass. Which I think is probably I don't know what more shocking, so you're telling me you're gonna drop out of school and you're gonna join a bluegrass band and you think it's gonna work. I'm like, yeah, got a feeling, right? And then sure enough, it worked. And, it worked pretty quickly. And so they were able to see, like, right away, that the decision was a correct one. And then, of course, Mom and Dad became the biggest fans.
Yeah.
Mom still is. She goes to a couple shows a year, and she's like festival mom. She's everybody's mom.
So now the years have progressed, and everything is different, because now you actually, I assume, it's a business. You have roles that you weren't used to having. You have decisions to make. It's not just four guys who are like, hey, this is cool. So now, how's things now like different, and how do you make it work? I mean, I know you must have a team with you.
It's quite a bit different than it was. I mean, the four original members of Yonder, we parted ways, and Jeff is doing his own band now, and we hired Jake Jolliffe and Ali Kroll to play music with us, and it's quite a bit different. The sound is different. It's
seems you just keep getting bigger and bigger, though.
I think
the love is tremendous that people have for you. The audiences seem to be getting bigger and bigger.
It's definitely it's a blessing to get to do this, right? And we do have people who have stuck with us, and can still come out to see the shows. And
sure.
my favorite obviously is getting to play festivals like this, excuse me, you show up, you've got a captive audience of however many thousands of people, right? And your job is to just go out there and entertain them and, bring the fire as best you can, right? That's the most fun. Playing outside, weather's nice, everybody's having a good time. That's my favorite part of it. But yeah, it is a business, and we've got.
Do you have a family now?
Yeah, have a son, married with, have a son. He's 7, one and done for me.
Are you prepared for him to do something where you might say, "Hey, be cautious"?
Sure. Honestly, we talk about it amongst ourselves. I don't know that I would wish a career in the music business for him. I don't know, and he's only 7. I'm certainly, encouraging him with music, not doing the enforced, lessons,
Right.
but all my instruments are available to him. He's, he's.
But you sort of, from what you're saying now, your path was almost like blessed. Like you didn't sound like you really, struggled as much. I'm sure there was struggle, but you were like in school at a point when all of a sudden it took off. So like you didn't have a rock bottom really.
No.
So you're real fortunate in that way. And people seem to, even with a band disruption and change, seems to have worked out for everyone, it seems.
Yeah, so far, knock on wood, right?
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing, and it is whether it's just a certainly tremendous good fortune, blessings coming from wherever they come from, and hard work, but we never had the real. And of course, we romanticize as we look back in time.
Right.
There's certainly a lot of long drives for no money,
Sure.
and like grinding. But we didn't have to grind as hard or as long as a lot of people that we know.
Now, when you said before to me, there's an upcoming album that is somewhere in the future, and how does that album differ from, say, your first album as far as like songwriting and band coordinating, the music itself?
The process is very similar, in that the songwriters in the band, we kind of have an idea and you sort of flesh it out to the best of your ability and show it to everybody, and have your friends help bring it home.
So it stayed the same over the years.
But the process,
for the most part.
for me anyway, it has. Yeah. I've always been. Adam and Dave have developed more of a collaborative songwriting process. I'm much more of a loner when it comes to the songs that I write. I tend to want to show up with them mostly done, to have the lyrics be something that I'm trying to, personal to me, something that I'm trying to express. But I've certainly gotten a lot of help from everybody as well when I need it.
And Jake and Allie, are they like the kids of the band?
Yeah, they're the new kids.
Yeah.
We've been playing music with them now for 5 years, but still think of them as the new kids.
Yeah.
They are. Jake writes a lot of instrumentals. Allie is interested in writing, but hasn't found the right partnership. I think that it will take. She'll find somebody to co-write with her.
She's got a lot of power with the audience.
You
People
think?
Really, just
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some people are born with it, and
Yeah.
she was. She's I think of it as this X factor.
Yeah.
I don't exactly know what it is,
Right.
but I've seen it be the case where she steps up to the microphone and is about to play a fiddle solo, and they're already cheering.
Yeah, place goes insane.
Yeah, and that's before she's even started.
Yeah.
And me as the bass player, I'm looking over like, well, that's not fair. Come on, how do you do that? But she's they broke the mold with her.
Yeah. So what's in the future? You got an album coming out?
Yeah, I'm not sure. We just got out of the studio. We're gonna be, rather than with schedules being what they are, we're gonna release a series of EPs rather than waiting the duration of time that it takes to get an album out.
Right.
I think in this day and age too, it's sort of albums are, you can maybe get a little bit more press if you have an album rather than an EP, but anymore, if you got a song, record the song and put it out. It's not like people are buying CDs anyway. It's all digital,
you guys are certainly in a position where whatever you do, you're going to get the attention. So I think you could write your own, whatever it is you want to do.
Yeah, we just want to, once we have this stuff recorded, we just want to put it out. And so we're going to, and also starting to think of concepts for some of these recordings. I know the next album that we're going to put out, that's going to be a full album, will be more of a concept, where we all sit down together with a theme or a story or something, and we write to that theme or to that story. But in the meantime, we're going to put out this next EP. Hopefully it'll be out could be out even in a month. And then we'll follow that up with another one that's going to be more punk rock, or at the very least alternative. Do a couple covers on it, a couple original tunes that we wrote that have more of that spirit. And then we're going to put out, we'll follow that one up with a lot of old songs that we have that just were never recorded. I mean, we've got like 25 or 30 old songs that show up in the set and that are like classics in our world, but were never recorded for some reason. So we're going to put those down, get those recorded, and put those out.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's terrific. Well, thanks for talking to us.
Sure.
And it was really fascinating hearing everything you said. And we all look forward to everything you guys do in the future. And we'll be at all the shows. And we can't wait to see you again and hear the new albums. And thanks for all your time, man.
Yeah, appreciate it.